I'm so glad that I got to hear Bruce's talk because it dovetails so nicely with this one. He talked a lot about the policy, the high-level societal issues that we need to address with security, and now I'm going to take it down a lot more to the very, very personal. We live double lives today. We live both in the physical world and in the digital world. And due to the consumerization of IT, we now spend pretty much our entire lives from cradle to grave in this digital world. It starts even, before you're born, when your parents start putting your ultrasound pictures online and so on. When my oldest was about 3 or 4 years old, before he could even read, we put him in front of a web browser and let him play on children's sites on the internet. And one day we caught him in the middle of downloading and installing a browser plugin. And we went, how could this have happened? We figured out that he must have learned how to deal with the security interface that he was presented with, even though he couldn't read. When he saw a pop-up, he learned that it would usually have 2 rectangles in it, and one of them would be outlined darker than the other one, because that was the default choice in the security question. And he learned that if he clicked on the dark outlined one, as his parents usually did, it would make the pop-up go away, and he could go back to what he was doing. So this worked just fine for him to start downloading a plugin that was offered to him until he got to the end-user license agreement, which did not have a default outlined rectangle. It was, decline and accept or agree or disagree. He didn't know what to do, so that's where he got stuck, and that's where we found him. So even at a very young age, kids are learning to navigate security controls that are not designed for them, but they are still being conditioned by those interfaces, and we have to keep this in mind. As kids get older, when they go to school, they get to the age where their data has to be separated from others because a regulation has to be protected. So this is the point at which they have to start logging in. But little kids don't know their numbers and letters yet, and they can't type, so how are they supposed to log into a system? I used to volunteer to help the kindergarten teacher log in each of the 30 or 40 kids in the class at the beginning of each classroom session. That's not tenable at all. Now, there are some companies that are starting to address this. There's one called Clever that has come up with a QR code that you can wear on a badge on a lanyard so that the kid can hold up the badge to the web camera and log in that way. But that's kind of a stopgap solution. How many of you have kids who had to lie about their age to get onto a social media platform? Yeah. That's what happens all the time. When my oldest turned 13, I got an email from our prescription service provider saying that now that he was 13, he needed his own login, and he needed to register an account and then authorize me to continue to manage his prescriptions for him. So he needed to register an account, did he? Okay. So I registered an account for him. And of course, I knew all the demographic information that they ask as quasi-authentication, place of birth, date of birth. I know all this because I was there. So I typed it all in and registered him with a different email account, and I authorized myself, and I went back to it. So again, this is not designed for this stage of life that we need. As we go along through life, we start adding more and more accounts. We add things for work, for school, for shopping, for social, for government, and they just keep accreting over and over throughout our lifetime. Now, one of the big mistakes that we made as technologists was to decide that the primary credential for authentication should be stored in this fallible organic matter, or as Chuck Wendig calls it, the poetry-generating custard. That is not a good place to be storing primary credential information, especially since now we have so many unique ones. The second mistake that we made was telling people that they could never write it down, because that was okay when everybody only had one login and you could memorize that, but now that we have literally hundreds of accounts out there, we cannot It is not tenable to tell users that they have to have unique strings and they have to be really long and you have to change them every so often and this sort of thing. This is not useful. This is not helpful. About 30 to 35 years ago, when I started in this field, we were all writing software for one another. It was a very small community. We had pretty much the same background information, the same level of understanding. And that's why you could describe something as being intuitively obvious, because everybody kind of knew the same things going into it and they could figure it out. That's not the case anymore. We don't write for one another anymore. We write for the world. We write for our neighbors, we write for our friends, for our children, for our parents, for people in countries we've never visited. And so we have to make this security control set, this interface, something that anybody can use. Something like, how about a spoon? You know how to use these, right? These are very, very difficult to use wrong. You learn how to use them. You know, maybe you pick them up when you're a toddler, but after that, it's designed so it's very hard to use wrong. You go anywhere in the world, you see a spoon, you pick it up, you know how to use it. We don't have to have annual awareness campaigns for spoons. Wouldn't it be great if we had security that was designed like a spoon? You couldn't use it wrong. That would change so many of the dynamics in our society, forgive me, between the hackers who go, oh, you did it wrong, and because this is not fair. In the future, we will have pushback from the rest of the world going, how is this our fault that this is not secure? So we keep building these up over and over through time, and we're also not accommodating the people who become temporarily incapacitated, the people who are disabled, who can't navigate this digital world by themselves, people who get older and are declining and lose their ability to do this. That's what happened with my mother. As she declined, she became less able to navigate the computer interface, but she didn't want to admit it, and she wouldn't give it up. But there were things that she needed to do that she needed my help with. And we don't have good delegation for this sort of thing. In the United States, or at least in Texas, when you execute a durable power of attorney, it can take effect in one of two ways. Either, if the person who signs it becomes incapacitated, it can take effect and you can handle their affairs for them. But you have to go to court and get them declared incapacitated first, which will completely ruin your relationship with them. The other way is if you sign it and it takes immediate effect, which is much easier, because then I can say something like, Mom, you look tired. Do you want me to just log in and pay this bill for you? And she'd go, yes. So I would do this more and more frequently for her until she couldn't do it at all. The same thing happened with my father, who taught me programming when I was around 12 years old. He had a stroke, and I had to break into his computer to get to his email to reset his banking passwords so that I could continue to pay my parents' bills for them. It's a good thing he didn't believe in security, because I was able to break into his account. I probably technically violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in the United States by doing this, but it was the only way to quickly get to access to his things, to what I needed. And that's the problem, because again, we don't have good delegation. So what we really need is a lifeline, an intermediary that spans our entire life and interfaces for us where we are, that meets us where we are, that explains things in terms that we can understand. Because when I logged into my parents' email accounts, I set my alternate email address in the account so that I could reset it or change the password if I needed to. So I put my personal email address, wendy@nather.com, as the alternate email address for Gmail. I didn't really understand how Google was going to use it, because what happened was that my name, my address, which is not hosted with Google, became intertwined with my parents' accounts. So after that, when anybody who used Google email tried to send me an email to wendy@nather.com, they would say, oh, you mean her mom. oh, you mean her dad? And I would get an email sent to me, to my address, with one of my parents' names on it as the two. That's pretty unsettling when they think you're their parents. There was somebody who was trying to contact me for a breach notification, and he didn't have my address, but he used Gmail. So he started typing in my name, and it helpfully said, oh, you want Wendy@Nather.com. And when I got his email about the breach notification, attached to it was my parents' private nickname for me. Now, this is really creepy, especially since my parents had passed on by that time. So I, removed my email address. I talked to Google. They tried to clean it up. They couldn't, because somewhere in their database, somewhere is still that association. So we need an interface that explains to us what happens when you set something like this up. And we need it to be universally standardized so that you can go and give your loved one a delegated access to everything that you need. Now, we're starting to work on this. There are a couple of ways in which I'm starting to see the first glimmers of hope here. One of them, of course, is the beginnings of a programmatic interface that's shielding the user from all of these interfaces, and that is the password manager, where you can store all of your passwords, and it will put them in for you into all of these other sites. And that's really nice, but the problem is you can share your passwords with a loved one, but if you log in as them, you start running afoul of the fraud detection mechanisms on the back end that are trying to spot, especially in banking, they're trying to spot whether this is an account takeover attack. They're trying to figure out if you're the wrong person using that account. So this is not the answer, just giving somebody your own passwords and letting you use them. We need true tracked delegation to be able to do that. We're starting to see something else. We're starting to see a root of trust that is based in this, in the cell phone. Now we have secure storage modules in a lot of these that can perform cryptographic functions securely. There are emerging standards like web authentication, where the idea is that you can authenticate to your device, and then your device will do the rest of authentications for you. There's a problem with that one too, though. Oops. Did everybody just cringe when I did that? Is everybody going, oh God, pick it up, don't step on it? This is why this is not going to be the final answer either. Also, besides, the assumption is that this is your personal one and you're the only one who uses it, which is not the case around a lot of parts of the world. Not everybody has a smartphone. Those who do often share them. So yes, this is not going to be an ultimate solution. We need a more robust solution, again, that meets everything that we need. It needs to be able to handle all of your different identities. And yes, there are a lot of different identity projects out there, but I'm talking about something bigger. I'm talking about interfacing with all of the security and privacy controls on your behalf, that can answer questions for you. What will happen if I allow this? If we had had this, then my 3 or 4-year-old would have just gotten a voice message that said, call mom and dad, instead of, would you like to install this thing, yes or no? So, that goes through life and that adapts to what you need when you reach your age of majority, that takes your parents off of your accounts, that helps you add delegates as you need them. And it needs to work cross-border, because a lot of the things that we do have nothing to do with our country of origin or our country of residence. It needs to enjoy global trust, which is a very, very difficult thing for any entity to achieve today. But it also has to be compliant with all of the different security and privacy regulations around the world. And then finally, it needs to be able to move at the speed of bits and bytes, not at the speed of paperwork. So this is a very tall order, but here's my bold prediction, I believe that in 10 to 20 years, we will have something like that, a secure intermediary that covers our digital lifespan from cradle to grave. I'm fudging the time a little, 10 to 20 years, because some entity is going to have to earn global trust to be able to do that, and that takes time. But I can tell you, frankly, if there's money to be made in solving a security problem on a global scale, you can bet somebody's going to step up and do it. Let's just hope it's the right one. Thank you.